The Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Planted. I'm Sara, your host, and today I have an old friend on the podcast and colleague. We worked together for several years, Saundra Davis. She is a Navy veteran, money mentor, speaker, educator, and consultant, and she's also the founder of Sage Financial Solutions, a nonprofit specializing in financial coach training and education and planning for low wealth and underrepresented communities. Saundra and I worked together at a nonprofit called Earn many, many years ago, and I learned a lot from her, really about generational wealth, underrepresented communities, and what we need to do to empower people so that they can empower their families and they can have wealth throughout the ages. So, Saundra, welcome. Thank you for being here. It's been a long time, and I'm just so excited to have this conversation today.
I cannot even tell you how happy I am. Number one, just so proud of the work that you're doing. And then to have an opportunity to talk with you about it and the connection, between wealth and this field, this field that you're making such strides in. I'm just really glad to be here. So glad you're doing so well and glad to be able to talk to you about it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, well, I'm going to ask you the question I ask all my guests. Even though you're not in the cannabis sphere, when was the first time you used cannabis and what was it like?
So there's two stories to that. First is the first time I wanted people to think I used cannabis, right? So I was the no kidding. I was the scariest kid, right? I was that kid that never wanted to get in trouble, but wanted to look like I was cool, right? So I was this super, super nerd. I was in junior high school at APG&E in San Francisco. And there was this dude that I had just the biggest crush on, and he was the biggest weed head in school, and everybody knew he was the biggest weed head, biggest player, and I just had this crush on him that you would not believe. It was crazy. And I wanted him to think that I got high too, right? So one of my brothers had his little weed stash in the cigar box in his bedroom. And so I'm going to be in so much trouble when he hears this. So I went in there and I steal his stash, right? I steal some of his stuff to take it to school so that my friend would think, so this dude would think that I, was a school kid. Honey, that dude took my weed, went on about his business. He wasn't thinking about me. He wasn't thinking about me. He just had no interest in me whatsoever. Apparently, my nerdiness showed through. And, back then, this was maybe 1971. And, he wasn't buying it. My game was peaked. He was not interested. It didn't matter how good my brother's weed was. He was not even remotely interested in me. So that was my first, experience, right? Then the second thing was we happened to live next door to a police officer. And, I have three older brothers, and one of my brothers had a weed plant growing in the yard, right? And so the police officer comes over to the house and he tells my mom, he's like, well, I'm getting ready to have a party here, and a lot of my police officer friends are going to be here. So y'all should probably cut down this plant. You should cut down this plant.
I couldn't neighbor.
Have been more. Exactly, right? Because he could have handled that. I mean, back then, he could have handled that a completely different way. And so, and of course, my mom didn't know what the plant was, which was surprising. But, back then, she was old and didn't really know what was happening either. But yeah, so those are the first awareness of weed, right? That's first awareness. So I didn't actually use weed until I was probably, I guess, around 17. And I had joined the Navy, and of course, they had the zero tolerance policy, but back then they didn't have any real way to to do anything about it. They just told us don't mess with it, and everybody said, yeah, okay, we won't. But they didn't really have a way to keep us from using it at that point. They weren't drug testing or anything like that at that point. And so I was in Norfolk, Virginia, and we're sitting there, and we're high, and I go to sleep. And so my friend is like, look, I can't be wasting my weed on you. You can't. So my punkness just continued. I was just this biggest wimp. And even to this day, like, I can use a combination of THC, CBD for, like, if I'm having discomfort or pain or just need to rest. But man, if I'm still such a lightweight, it's not even funny. It's pitiful. I'm such a lightweight. And the grateful part of that is that, I can have tincture or something, and one small bottle will last me for a year. I'm just such a lightweight that it lasts forever. So I'm actually kind of grateful for that.
Oh, I think that's a great thing. I always tell people, because when people tell me they say they have a low tolerance, there's always the lowering of the eyes and, like, the shameful look. And I'm like, that's awesome. Do you know how much money you save?
Exactly. I'm such a lightweight.
Well, there's something new that I didn't know, and I love it.
That I'm a lightweight? You didn't know?
Well, and I hadn't heard your cannabis experiences either.
Well, yeah. It's funny because I never really think about it. I mean, now, of course, things are legal. I will say this. I think I still have probably what a lot of people of my generation have, is that I think a lot of us still haven't adapted to the legality of it, right? So there's still, I won't say a taboo, but a discomfort. I don't really have a taboo. I didn't before this either, but I think that there's still this element of, be careful about how much of your business you put in the street, because, but the wonderful thing about being my age now is that as long as what I'm doing is not illegal and I'm not hurting anybody but me, anybody who has a problem with the choices that I make, then we're just not a good fit together.
Right.
So that's okay. I can live with that. I can live with that. I am who I am. Me and Popeye. I am who I am, and I accept other people as they are, and people have to do the same for me.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder too, like, because the last downtown job that I was working with you, and then after cancer, I went into cannabis. So of course we were all talking about our cannabis use. But when I was going through treatment, I was really reluctant to let my colleagues know that I was using cannabis, because I was worried about that impacting my job. And I do wonder, like, how many people feel free having those conversations even now, even though less companies than ever are doing drug testing for cannabis. It's an interesting thing to kind of see, because I live in a little bubble now, but it was very different before. And that was also, though, before legalization. So I wonder how much that's changed as far as conversations in the office.
Yeah, I suspect people still feel pretty cautious, particularly people like, I'm in the financial planning world. So I would suspect that people still have, a bit of nervousness about what they say and to whom.
Yeah.
And I think the unfortunate part about that is that people don't have any problem saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to go and drink 5 shots of tequila after work today. But they would be uncomfortable saying, yes, CBD and THC is how I am able to rest at night, or how I manage my anxiety, or how I, navigate a world that is dead set on crushing my spirit, So it's like, did I just slip that in there? Yeah. So, I think that's, I think that's an important aspect of even this conversation, and the thing I appreciate about what you do of, the same way, to be honest, the same way I, demythify money, you demythify weed and cannabis, right? So I think that that's a really good role that you're playing to make sure that people can understand, what it means, what it doesn't mean. I know a lot of people who are comfortable using it and yet not comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
And in a world, let me finish the thought. In a world where there are so many young Black folks still in jail behind weed, behind selling weed or using weed or whatever. It's just, I think there's still a lot of angst, in our society. And until all of those ills are dealt with, I think it's going to be very difficult to have real open conversations across the generations and in the office place and stuff like that,
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I learned a lot from you because you had to have a lot of conversations with people around their relationships with money and things like that, which is a very vulnerable place to be. And a lot of people just avoid those conversations. And you just always had such a compassionate and a compassionate way of working with people and also empowering them. And I just always found that so incredibly inspiring, which was why when I was one of the chairs of the legalization task force for San Francisco, and we first started talking about social equity and how to be able to help people who were impacted by the war on drugs. And we started talking about giving people opportunities to own businesses. And the first thing I thought of was, well, some of the work that, we had done at the nonprofit, but specifically about you and how you have really good conversations about people's relationships with money and how those habits can be passed down and how do we create generational wealth. I'm just wondering if you can speak some more to that, because I think it's part of the equation. We talk about getting people in business. We talk about creating equitable partnerships and opportunities. And those are all great. And quite honestly, they're not really happening the way we wanted them to. It's equity. There's a lot of good players in equity that are trying to make it look the way it should. And there's a lot of bullshit out there. And there's a lot of people trying to game the system and take away, opportunities for the people who these are actually supposed to be for. But even if somebody does succeed, and there are definitely some, very successful Black-owned businesses and cannabis businesses that are owned by people of color. But you can succeed in your business and you can still lose it all if you don't have a good relationship with your money.
Right. For me, so there's a couple things. We can't talk about wealth building without talking about wealth stripping. So if you think about it, every person who is still in prison or justice involved, as we like to call it now, everyone who is still justice involved related to old cannabis charges or whatever, their family has generational trauma. They were unable to provide for their families. They were unable to be present for their families. Their shame was created around their choice to sell cannabis to make a living, right? So in addition to them not being able to be present, there's the shame, the blame, all of that goes with it. And the ability to access wealth building strategies, right? And so when we just start there, cannabis as it is today, and the people who are making money today, I don't have to tell you, they're not those folks. And I believe that these equity efforts are no different than every other equity effort that has happened in this country. The civil rights, as far as civil rights, as far as affirmative action benefited women, white women, by far more than benefited Black people. Efforts to remove barriers benefited equal rights, benefited white women more than Black people. And so even things that are supposed to be designed to benefit us, in more often than not, they just simply did not. That's not an accident. That's by design.
Right.
And so when people say, oh, the system's broken, I say, no, the system's doing what the system was designed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And Black people are always at the bottom. That's why I don't consider Black people when I say people of color. No, because people of color will walk on us to get over that hurdle, to get what they need to get for their own community. When it comes to Black folks, very, very few people have our back in the way we have theirs. So for me, that's just like number one. So when I say Black, I mean Black. When I say people of color, I mean people of color.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the Black community to have access in the same way, we're going to have to do everything for ourselves just like we always have. Just like we always have. You know, when we look at the rebuilding of Tulsa, you know, last year was a big year about the rebuilding of Tulsa. So a lot of people were aware of things they never were before. To me, this is analogous to that. As soon as Black folks have an opportunity to build wealth, move forward, there's going to be something that undercuts that effort, right? And so we have to recognize that makes our own choices and our own relationship with our money and our own decisions of how we use our wealth even more important. Because not only do we generally not have the same access, we also come under a level of scrutiny that nobody else comes under, right? And so we have to watch it, we've got to grow it, and then we got to make sure we keep it. And so when you look at what's happening around Black neighborhoods in the Bay Area, I was born and raised in San Francisco. You know, the Fillmore doesn't look like me anymore, right? The Bayview doesn't look like me anymore. Lakeview doesn't look like me anymore, right? So understanding that Black people as a race of people in the United States are always under some kind of fire or under some kind of scrutiny above and beyond anybody else. You know, and that's the reality of our experience in this country. Now, rather than get into oppression Olympics, we have to figure out, so then what do we do? So what does Saundra do? One of the reasons that you connected with me the way you did or said what you said about how I can relate to people is that I talk from the reality that I have faced. I dropped out of high school at 17 years old, took my GED, joined the Navy. When my mom had to sell our home, I had to take care of myself. So this college-bound, nerdy kid that I just described to you literally had to learn how to fend for herself. I had a horrible perspective and relationship with money. I didn't understand that I was even supposed to have a relationship with money, number one. Didn't even know that was a thing. And so I made a lot of financial mistakes. So what happens for me when I'm talking with people, irrespective of how they got into the situation they're in, I'm going to talk to them from a place of where is your power? What are the things you're already doing well? What are the areas where there's a gap between what you know and what you do? You might hear the saying, oh, if you know better, you do better. Well, maybe not. But you can't do better if you don't know better. So the first thing is making sure we understand our own money personality, our own perspective about money. What causes us when we are the one in the family to make it financially, to not sit down and have a conversation with our family and say, hey, look, I've got this windfall. We can't blow this. So that means I'm not going to be doling out a bunch of cash to everybody. We're going to be smart. And we're going to think about this as how do we generate wealth using this cash flow, this windfall as leverage, right? And so that means somebody in the circle has to understand that. Because, I mean, you and I know, and every research paper will tell you, some of the kids that were selling weed and making a living, it's not about smart, it's not about intelligence. It's about understanding how money works in your life. Mm-hmm. Right? So I was raised with a mom who bought a new car every 2 years. Now, who knew they lasted longer than that? Right? But they do. But my mom was raised really super poor. So for her, the ability to go out and buy this new car meant something to her. It meant she had made it. It meant she had achieved. So she didn't stop to think about, okay, this is really getting in the way of me saving and building wealth and putting money away for school for my kids or whatever. She didn't think about it that way. It wasn't that she was trying to be flashy or show. It wasn't that. She was such a impoverished child that the ability to go and spend money this way was satisfying to her soul. And so when people who either have less, have been oppressed, disenfranchised, or whatever, when we then have access, we have to be mindful of what does the money mean to us? What does the money do for us? And how we spend it, save it, share it, or invest it. Well, those are the only four things you can do. Spend it, save it, share it, invest it. That's it. There's nothing else. So how do we do one of those four things in a way that aligns with our desired outcome, our goals, our values? So for me, I tell people all the time, I keep my needs small so my wants can be outrageous. When I go to Africa, I'm gone a month at a time. I take off every October, the entire month for my birthday. I don't work on Fridays. I don't work the last week of the month. I keep my monthly, regular, required expenses low so that I can live the life I want. Now, I'm 60 years old, right? So I'm not going to do too much of nothing I don't want to do anyway. But it's, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But my point in this is that money buys me time. So I don't buy a lot of things. I don't need nothing. I have everything I want. Right? I live in a small 2-bedroom condo. My car is damn near older than you. Right? My car has 360,000 miles on it. Right? But what this allows me to do is fly first class to Ghana and go to Benin, Togo, and then take another trip the following year to Senegal, Gambia, and Guinea-Bissau. Because that is what I care about. Right? So with my grandkids, I don't buy them gifts. I have 3 grandchildren. I don't buy them gifts. But I can take them on a month-long trip on a Black History tour in the South. So that's what I value. That wasn't always the case. When I was a young woman, I had more money in my son's video game collection than in his college fund. I didn't understand. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize what I was doing. Now I own the condo that I live in. I own a home that my son and daughter-in-law will inherit. That my grandchildren, that homeless teenager that I was, my grandchildren will never have to worry about that. So I bought a house and I put it in a trust. So what you experienced when you met me was you experienced Saundra learning first for herself and then sharing what she learned. Talking about myself in the third person because I'm special like that, right? Sharing what she learned to the community at large. So I came into this field. I got a master's degree in financial planning so that I could help my people. Now, I help all kinds of people. But I did it so that I could help my people. Because Black folks didn't have the same kind of access to information that other people had. And even when they did, you know, you can't go too far without seeing how many Black athletes, actors, prominent people who trusted somebody to handle their taxes, and then they end up going to jail for tax evasion because they didn't understand what somebody else was doing with their money. Right? So those are the things that I was trying to deal with. So I've worked with athletes. I've worked with people who have multi-millions and had to then have a different kind of conversation with their family. Because, you know, and this isn't only for Black folks, most people, when they have a windfall, they want to support their family. They want to help. And there's no shame in that. I get very annoyed when I hear a financial planner or advisor say, oh, well, you got so-and-so on the payroll. You need to get this. Look, you on the payroll. You're getting a fee for managing somebody else's money. And so what makes you think this money shouldn't benefit the family and build that generational wealth? So when we think about it, and I know I'm on a tear right now, I'm going to stop so you get to say something. We need to turn from this disproportionate legal response that Black people went through and this disenfranchisement that we still experience, and now begin to make a decision for ourselves. What do we want this money to mean? What does it mean to me as a woman at 60, which is very different than what it meant as a woman at 40 and 30 and 20. So what does it mean for you now, where you are right now? And what do you want it to mean so that you can take care of 50-year-old you and 60-year-old you and 70 and 80-year-old you? So how do we think about our money as a bigger life cycle?
Right. Right. And no, you didn't go on a tear. That was that was exactly what needed to be said. Yeah, I mean, we do see like, well, I'm going to go a little off topic, but even, how people have been being super lame with passing voting rights.
Mm-hmm.
It's just we
Mm-hmm.
we do have a lot of people still languishing in jail. And even states like California, where we're starting to, expunge people's records and things like that, we still have people languishing in jail. And why is that? It's because of money, because they're all privatized. And when we're looking at,
Mm-hmm.
when we were first having the conversations around social equity programs like that, I just remember saying to everyone on the task force, I'm like, these people aren't criminals, they're entrepreneurs. And then they look at
Mm-hmm.
you.
And always were. And always were.
Yeah.
Always were.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And and so that's the hard part about, being a Black person in a country that loves to hate you, and that's what, folks are dealing with, and that's what folks have to grapple with. And here's the thing, you got to do all of that without letting them win, right? So do I ignore that? And first of all, I'm a very light-skinned Black woman, right? So people don't know what the hell they're looking at when they look at me. So they say some of the craziest stuff around me. You can't even imagine some of the stuff people will say to me, not realizing they're talking to a Black woman. So, that in and of itself is a whole other situation. But when people look at the situation as it is today, and look at the choices that people have to make just to survive and thrive, to get to the point where you're not just surviving, but you're actually thriving. Even if you are out of the justice system and expunged, to what end? Then what?
Right. It doesn't
then
undo the trauma that you've been through.
Exactly. And one of the things that we know, there's this wonderful book called Scarcity. And this book talks about, there's another one called The Body Keeps the Score, which you probably already know about. But scarcity is about how your brain is affected by trauma and distress and how it impacts your ability to make good financial decisions. So if we're going to accept and acknowledge that people who have been adversely impacted, by the justice system, and even if they're out, they got an opportunity to do a business, the whole 9 yards, even with all of that, the trauma is still present. So how do we then recognize the financial impacts of the trauma and the decision making, like, Saundra's personal ability to make good financial decisions when I'm under stress or dealing with the aftermath of a trauma. So we just can't ignore those kinds of things. We can't do, what everybody loves to do when it comes to Black folks so much. Oh, well, just get over it. It's over now. It's over now. Things are better. Well, not really. Not really. Things are not really better.
No, it's not. I mean, that's like, well, before we worked together, when I was working at Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and that was when President Obama was a senator when I first started working there.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was inaugurated, we all took the morning off to watch. And after that, we were having issues on the development side because people were like, well, it's all over. We have a black president now. There aren't no issues with civil rights. And so we were like, oh, you've not seen our docket.
Yeah. And here's the thing. There's two aspects. There's a lot of conversation around, well, whose job is it to educate people? Is it black folks' job to educate people about racism? And should we be doing the emotional labor, right? And it's both and. It's not my job to do it. And if people are ignorant by choice, that's one thing. But if people, I don't do a lot of DEI work because of this very reason, right? It's not my job to shepherd you through the lies for you to figure out the truth. But I also understand that when people, like even when you asked me to do this, it's like, well, where does the money thing fit in with the cannabis? Well, everywhere, because there's no aspect of our lives, nothing that money doesn't touch.
Right.
Nothing, not one thing. And so if we ignore, I don't know a lot, admittedly, I don't know a lot about the cannabis equity programs. It is my observation from the limited knowledge that I have that they're not really any more effective than, other similar programs. It does not appear to me that, number one, the justice issues are dealt with. And then number two, that black businesses are having the same level of benefit that others are having, Mm-hmm. And kicking a little bit to the side for folks is just not sufficient.
No,
it's not sufficient. So
it's not, and we have activists that own and work in the industry that are doing a lot of great social justice work.
Mm-hmm.
But those aren't the people
Mm-hmm.
who are creating, the legal aspects of these programs, the foundational aspects of these programs in the municipalities. And that's where things are getting messed up. I mean, it's even when we were first talking about all this, the language that we have to use, like when we were talking about the equity program in San Francisco, and they're saying, okay, well, we are going to gear it towards people who were impacted by the war on drugs. And I'm like, I know we can't say black people, but when you say that, other people are going to go in there and get the benefits that were not meant for them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And here's the thing. They can't say black people, but they can profile black people. It's like, yeah. But you and I are having, an age-old conversation. That is the reality of being black in the United States. I have accepted that is not going to change in my lifetime. While that is disheartening, I refuse to accept the lies that, things are better. Well, no, they're not better. I still in 2022 lose sleep when my partner goes out to the golf course. I still worry when my son jogs around a neighborhood that, he doesn't live in. I'm still concerned about my grandchildren being able to grow old, so that's just, that's how it is. Yes, I still have the talk. I have to have the same talk with my grandsons that my mother had to have with my brothers from 60 years ago. So, while it is nice to think we're in a kumbaya moment and all the Black Lives Matter and everybody loves us this week, I'm not in agreement with that. That is not my experience. That's not what I see.
No.
So I said all that to say, what does that have to do with money? What does it have to do with cannabis? I said all that to say, in the same way, the people in Tulsa are having to rebuild their own community under their own steam, that's what Black people are going to have to do in every aspect of what we do, which means we have to exercise our personal power in addition to the work we need to do around policy, advocacy, those kinds of things. I hear a lot of people say, well, Saundra, you're not really going to coach people out of the racial wealth gap. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. No way. Because the system, as I said, is doing what it's supposed to do. And all I can do, though, and where I spend my energy is helping people own their own personal power about their financial choices and their financial future. So that's what I can do. And that's, how I spend my whatever years I've got left, that's how I spend them.
Do you feel like your work in many ways plants a seed for, we're talking about generational wealth, and to be able to create a stronger population of financially empowered people? Because there's a lot to be said in this crazy ass world that where money is king about voting with your wallet and actually having, the monetary power to do that. Like for an example, I kind of see like at a greater scale, and when we're looking at celebrity, like a lot of the things that like Jay-Z is doing with other Black businesses and creating abundance. And that's like, I mean, it's amazing. And do you see that? I guess, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think it's both, right? That's absolutely necessary, and it's only going to go so far. It's only going to be able to accomplish so much, only because as long as people, just like what you said about, having a Black president, as long as people can say, oh, it's not so bad anymore, they got Black billionaires, right? So it both helps and harms. Mm-hmm. It can hide the problem because people can think, oh, yeah, well, it's all equal now. Anybody that's Black that's not, on their way to be a billionaire, that's their own problem. It's the level, the playing field's level now. So it has its strengths and its weaknesses. Now, I, again, admittedly, do not know nearly enough about, I don't even know that I want to know more, to be honest, about what, y'all youngins are doing about, girl, don't make me lie, about what y'all youngins are doing about, cannabis businesses and all that. I don't know, If I need some CBD, my son swings by and I've never even been. No, that's not true. I've been in one business, which was kind of cool. I like how they were set up. But, I think we just have to be realistic about what kind of impact that can have, because unless it is so accessible, the business end of it, I mean, right? Unless the business end of it is so accessible that in the same way, somebody can open up a beauty shop, or they can open up a catering business, or they can, not only to get it open, but to thrive. Because like you said, it's one thing to open a business. It's another thing to keep the money you've made. It's another thing to be able to create a business where you can thrive. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how available that is to the folks who are not Jay-Z,
It's hard. And
I don't know.
Oh, you would find it to be a nightmare, Saundra, because in San Francisco, in order to be able to apply for a permit, you have to already be renting the space. So you have a space that you're putting money into.
Oh my.
That's not drawing any revenue, and you could, possibly not get your permit.
Oh, wow.
And that's,
yeah.
And that's why, there are people who are equity operators that have had to take on partners that haven't done right by them because they've needed the revenue to keep afloat for the possibility of opening a business.
Yeah. And I really wish that I could say more and speak more intelligently about that. But, you know me well enough to know I'm never going to hold myself out as an expert that I don't know anything about. The areas that I am an expert, though, and that's where, you know, as Black people in this country, we have to be really mindful and thoughtful about our collective.
Yeah.
You know, who we are as a collective and how we grow as a collective. You know, I know a couple of people who are, you know, doing some work that I think is kind of similar to what you do. I don't really, again, know enough about it to speak intelligently, but, you know, there's got to be more of that, right? More of us who either are in a position, and maybe who don't understand the field, right? But have access to a location, you know, or have access. And you know, I don't know if something like that is happening where, there's a brother, Damon Lawrence, who is in the hospitality industry, and he is always looking for ways to help other small businesses thrive, you know, and I'm not suggesting that this is, you know, an area of work. I don't know. But my point is that he is always looking at how to help businesses who are not as far along as he is, in being able to grow and build, sometimes from nothing. And there, I don't know if you saw it. There's this group that just started. Actually, I think they kicked off yesterday, called The Bow. No. And it is a collaborative of Black women. You should check it out. It's this collaborative of Black women going after major government contracts. And so, and maybe this is already happening in the cannabis industry. I don't know, but maybe that's something that Black business owners, you know, who aren't the Jay-Z's of the world. I'm not knocking them, but they're not going to be able to do this for everybody. You know, there's going to be a whole bunch of people that they can never touch.
Right. And they're an anomaly.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So but yeah, so, you know, yeah, check out The Bow. I think, so when you ask what are my thoughts about that, I think programs like that, collaboratives like that, can make a huge, huge difference. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that's what but you know what? Here's the thing, Sarah. That's what it's always been for Black people. You know, any time we think we're going to do something and make it on our own without each other, that's where the whole concept of Ubuntu comes from. I am because you are. Because every time we do something successful, it's because we go far together.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not that we can't, you know, make some strides and do some of those things with people of other communities. I'm not saying that. You know, what's the standard? Some of my best friends are from other communities, right? So, but, you know, it's just the idea that we have to be able to collaborate in ways that often, you know, are beyond what other people might have to do. You know, we might have to do some things that other folks may not have to do, you know, in order to make it work for us. So yeah, I like things like that. I like collaboratives. I have a team of, you know, God knows there's like 15 coaches now. So when we deploy somebody for coaching projects, I've got a whole team of people that help the clients we work with. You know, most of our work is in the nonprofit sector, but we also do a lot of workforce, financial coaching so that people can work with somebody, number one, who looks like them and who has similar experiences to them and those kinds of things. So that's really a very joyful part of my work, you know, to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important, especially when you're dealing with something that puts you in such a vulnerable place like finance. And maybe a lot of people don't think of that off the top of their head as being a vulnerable place, but I sure do. I mean, it's just, it's super private, and we have our traumas and we have different things around that. And to be able to work with somebody who has seen and experienced the world through a similar lens has to be a very healing thing too.
Yeah. I think so. And I do think it's important for people to know how to find trusted advisors. So a big part of my work is also making sure that people know how to choose well. You know, whether you're getting, pro bono support or similar to what you all were trying to do, offer the equity partners some advice and some help that would not cost them anything. But even if you have to pay, how do you choose well? How do you know you're not getting scammed, ripped off, all of those things? And so that's really where we try to spend our time, to make sure that people, number one, have access, irrespective of their ability to achieve wealthy, what might be considered wealthy status, right? Mm-hmm. But then also, when you decide to choose, how do you choose in a way that you can trust your financial professional?
Right.
Because everybody, even if somebody's offering to do something for you pro bono, that doesn't mean, number one, that it's good. It also doesn't mean that they've got your best interest at heart. So, there's just a lot of things, no matter what race you are, no matter what financial position you're in, there's just a lot of things to consider. And you're right, money's a very sensitive topic for most people, I would say. And, the more we can normalize having conversations like this, the easier it will be for people to talk about things that might be a little bit more uncomfortable for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And if somebody is looking for, say you're an entrepreneur that's putting together your business and you're starting to realize that you need to tune up your relationship or heal your relationship with finance, what's a checklist of things that you should do when you're figuring out who and what you need to help you with this?
Yeah. So the first thing is kind of already knowing where you are, right? What's already going on with you? What are you doing that's working for you, and what are you doing that's not? And then deciding what kind of professional is going to be most helpful. For some people, you just might need a little bit of education, right? You just might need to know better. Other people, you already know, but maybe your behavior isn't aligned with the things that you really need to do and even know to do in order to get where you want to go. So, number one, do you know? If you know and you're having trouble with behavior, which, a lot of us do. I mean, that's certainly what brought me to the profession. I knew better. There were sometimes sometimes I didn't know, to be honest, but sometimes I knew better and I just wasn't doing better. It's just like, if you want to lose weight, we know we got to eat well and we got to exercise, right? You got to put out more than you take in. Same thing with money, right? The same thing. So there's that, but then there's also, if the doing better is hard, working with a coach is often going to be more resonant, because the focus isn't about the dollars and the cents. It's about the behavior. And how do you, in a non-judgmental and compassionate way, compassionate for self, really start to look at the choices that you're making and the choices you want to be making to change the situation that you're in. So that's where I would say start. And then, how to find a trusted advisor, that really has a lot to do with what you have access to, and I'd say the first thing is to know who's available to you. Like if you work for a company where there's a 401k or a 403b or something like that, you may have access to a financial planner who can help you do that. If you don't, there are programs like my program. There's also a platform, and I'll send you an email of this so you can share it with your listeners, where you can actually get free coaching support through a community-based a nonprofit called AFCPE. So if somebody contacts AFCPE and they ask for an FFC, that's FFC like Fred, Charlie, right? They'll actually get someone that I've trained, and they can get that support for free. Especially during COVID, it won't be free for long, because at some point we expect COVID won't last forever. But right now, people can get a financial coach at no cost to them. So there are a lot of ways to get that kind of support. You just want to make sure that the person feels right to you as well. Mm-hmm. So don't assume that you have to tolerate something that doesn't feel right to you. Money is personal. So don't put yourself in a position where you're stuck talking to somebody that you don't feel understands you, or even worse, doesn't care about your financial well-being.
Those are some really, really good tips. Thank you for that. I think, you know, a lot of us just get really anxious thinking about it in general, and we don't know where to start. And especially when it's compounded by maybe shame with how we've, how things have just been. No fault.
Yeah.
Life
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
And it can be really hard to navigate that and to even ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I just want to thank you for being on the show today, because I just don't get to see you enough. We're not seeing
I
you,
know.
and to hear your voice today, it just makes my heart sing. And you know how much immense love I have for you and immense respect I have for your work. And I just really, really am grateful that you're willing to be part of the conversation.
Well, thank you. The feeling is mutual. I'm so glad to see what you're doing. And, I think it's also encouraged me to learn a little bit more. I'm pretty much maxed. I'm a certified mindfulness teacher as well. So that's something I've recently added to my repertoire. So I'm pretty busy these days, but I really think the work you're doing is important. And I look forward to seeing what's next.
Thank you so much. If our listeners want to follow you on social media or contact you, how should they do that?
Yeah, so on Facebook and Twitter, Sage Money, and on Instagram, although I'm not really active right now, they kind of locked me out for a minute. I don't know what's up with that. On Instagram, I'm sage.money. Sorry about that, but that's how it is. And then, of course, I'm on LinkedIn, Saundra Davis. So any one of those platforms.
Awesome.
And my organization is sagefinancialsolutions.org.
Thank you so much. And for you listeners out there who want to follow Planted, we are on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. On Facebook, we are Planted with Sara Payan. We are Planted with Sara on Twitter and on Instagram. You can listen to Planted wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. We are on Pandora, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, all of it. You can tune in.
You get around, don't you, girl? You get around.
Oh, yeah, I'm everywhere. And spread the word. If there's an episode you like, share it. If you're listening to an episode on your favorite platform, leave us a review. Give us some idea of what you're liking, what you're not liking. We want to hear. We want to hear from you. We'd love it if you'd spread the love, because we've got a lot of great guests this month, and it's a crazy world out there. So be good to each other. Stay safe. Until next time, stay curious.